I have a 2-year-old daughter named Naya
I have a 2-year daughter, 2-year-old daughter Naya,
who's under the mistaken impression that this conference
who is under the mistaken impression that this conference
is named in honor of her father.
is named in honor of her father.
Who am I to contradict my baby girl?
Who am I, the country?
In honor of her father. Who am I to contradict my baby girl?
Who am I to contradict my baby girl?
As many of you know, there's something about becoming a parent
As many of you know, there's something about becoming a parent
that concentrates the mind on long-term problems
that concentrates the mind on long-term problems.
like climate change. It was the birth of my daughter that inspired me to launch
It was the birth of my daughter that inspired me to launch
this climate organization
this climate organization
in order to counteract the excessive polarization of
in order to counteract the excessive polarization
this issue
of this issue
in the United States and to find a conservative pathway forward.
and to find a conservative pathway forward.
Yes, folks, a Republican climate solution
Yes, folks, a Republican climate solution is possible.
is possible. And you know what? It may even be better.
It may even be better.
Let me try to prove that to you.
Let me try to prove that to you.
What we really need
is
a killer app to
a killer app
climate policy.
to climate policy.
In the technology world, a killer app is an application so transformative that it creates its own market.
In the marketing world, a killer app is the transformative app that creates its own market.
Like Uber.
Like Google. Like Uber?
Killer app is an application so transformative that it creates its own market.
A killer app is an application so transformative that it creates a market, creates its own market.
Like Uber.
Like Uber.
In the climate world,
a
killer app is a new solution
A killer app is a new solution
so promising that it can break through the seemingly insurmountable barriers to progress. These breakthrough market, like Uber. In the climate world, a killer app is a new solution so promising that it can break through this.
A killer app is a solution so promising that it can break through
Seemingly insurmountable barriers
the seemingly insurmountable barriers
to progress.
in the climate world. A killer app is a solution so promising that it breaks through the seemingly insurmountable barriers to progress.
These include
the psychological barrier.
Climate advocates have long been encouraging their
Climate advocates have long been encouraging their
fellow citizens to make short-term sacrifices now
encouraging their fellow citizens to make short-term scientific sacrifices now
for benefits that accrue to other people
for benefits that accrue to other people
in other countries 30 or 40 years in the future.
in other countries 30 or 40 years in the future.
It just doesn't fly because it runs
It just doesn't fly
contrary to basic human nature.
because it runs contrary to the because it runs contrary to the basic human nature. Doesn't fly. It doesn't fly. News is that the plan for the new hotel isn't gonna fly. Isn't gonna fly because it runs contrary to human nature.
Next is the geopolitical barrier.
Next is the geopolitical barrier. Next is the geopolitical barrier. Next is the geopolitical barrier.
Under the current rules of global trade,
Under the current rules of global trade,
countries have a strong incentive to free ride
countries have a strong incentive to free ride. Countries have a strong incentives to free ride
off the emissions reductions of other nations
of the emissions reductions of other nations,
instead of strengthening their own programs.
instead of strengthening their own programs. Under the current rules of
Under the current rules of global trade,
global trade, countries have a strong incentive to free ride of the emission reductions of other country without strengthening their own programs.
countries have a strong incentive to free ride off the emissions reductions of other nations instead of strengthening their own programs.
Instead of strengthening their own programs.
This has been the curse
This has been the curse.
of other nations instead of strengthening their own programs. This has been the curse of every international climate negotiation.
This has been the curse of every international climate negotiations,
Including Paris.
This has been the curse of every international climate negotiations, including Paris. This has been the curse. This has been the curse. This has been the curse. This has been the curse.
Finally, we have the partisan barrier.
Finally, we have the partisan barrier.
Even the most committed countries, Germany, the United Kingdom, Canada,
Even the most committed countries, Germany, United Kingdom, Canada. Even the most committed countries, Germany, United Kingdom, Canada,
are nowhere near reducing emissions at the required scale and speed.
are nowhere near
Reducing emissions
reducing emissions
at the required scale and speed.
at the required scale and speed. What? Even the most committed countries, including United States, Britain, and Canada, are nowhere near closer to the required scale and speed.
Committed countries, Germany, the United Kingdom, Canada, are nowhere near reducing emissions at the required scale and speed.
reducing emission at the required scale and speed.
Not even close.
Not even close.
And the partisan climate divide
And the partisan climate divide, and the partisan climate divide
is far more acute here in the United States.
is far more acute here in the United States. Is far more acute, and the partisan divide. The partisan climate divide is far more acute here in the United States.
Divide is far more acute here in the United States. We are fundamentally stuck.
We are fundamentally stuck. We are fundamentally stuck. We are fundamentally stuck.
And that is why we need a killer app.
And that is why we need a killer app. That is why we need a killer app.
Climate policy.
Killer app of climate policy. That's why we need a killer app of climate policy.
To break through each of these barriers.
To break through each of these barriers. To break through each of these barriers. To break through each of these barriers. We are stuck. We are now stuck here. That is why we need a killer app of the climate.
A killer app of
climate policy to break through each of these barriers.
Policy to break through each of these barriers. I'm convinced that the road to climate progress in the United States.
I'm convinced that the road to climate progress in the United States. I'm convinced that the road to climate progress in the United States
runs through the Republican Party.
Runs through the Republican Party. Runs through the Republican Party. Runs through the Republican Party.
And the business community.
And the business community. And the business community. And the business community. I'm convinced that what?
I'm convinced
that the road to climate progress in the United States runs through the Republican Party. Progress runs through the Republican Party and the business community.
That the road to climate progress in the United States runs through the Republican Party and the business community. So in launching the Climate Leadership Council, I started by reaching out to a who's who of Republican elder statesmen.
I started reaching out to who's who elder statesmen
and business leaders, including James Baker and George Shultz, the two most respected Republican elder statesmen in America.
The two most respected Republican elder statesmen.
America. Martin Feldstein and Greg Mankiw, the two most respected conservative economists in the country.
The two most respected economists. The two most respected economists.
And Henry Paulson and Rob Walton, two of the most successful and admired business leaders.
Two of the most successful and admired business leaders.
Together, we co-authored The Conservative Case for Carbon Dividends.
Together we co-authored The Conservative Case for Carbon Dividends. Together we co-authored The Conservative Case for Carbon Dividends.
This represents the first time that Republican leaders put forth.
This represents the first time the Republican leaders put forth. This represents the first time the Republican leaders put forth
a concrete, market-based climate solution.
A concrete, market-based climate solution. A concrete, market-based climate solution. A concrete, market-based climate solution. This is the first time that Republicans set forth a concrete, market-based climate solution.
Thank you. We presented our plan at the White House 2 weeks after President Trump moved in.
We presented our plan at the House at the White House 2 weeks after President Trump moved in.
Almost every leading editorial board in the country has
Almost every leading editorial board in this country. Almost every leading editorial board in this country
since endorsed our plan.
Has since endorsed our plan. Almost every editorial board in this country has endorsed our plan.
And Fortune 100 companies from a wide range of industries.
And Fortune 100 companies from a wide range of industries. and Fortune 100 companies from a wide range of industries
are now getting behind it.
are now getting behind it. Are now getting behind it. Are now getting behind it. And now, 100 Fortune 100 companies from a wide range of industries are now getting behind it.
So by now you're probably wondering,
So by now you're probably wondering. So by now you're probably wondering. So by now you're probably wondering.
what exactly is this plan? Well,
What exactly is this plan? What exactly is this plan? What exactly is this plan? So by now you're probably wondering what exactly this plan is about.
our carbon dividend solution is based on 4 pillars.
Our carbon-based solution. Our carbon dividend solution is based on 4 solutions. Our carbon dividend solution is based on 4 solutions.
The first is a gradually rising carbon tax.
The first is a gradually rising carbon tax. The first is a gradually rising carbon tax. The first is a gradually rising carbon tax.
Although capitalism is a wonderful system,
Although capitalism is a wonderful system,
like many operating systems,
like many operating system,
it's prone to bugs,
which is it's prone to bugs. It's prone to bugs.
Capitalism is a wonderful system. Like many operating systems, it's prone
It's prone to bugs. It's prone to bugs.
to bugs, which in this case are called market failures.
Which in this case are called market failure. Which in this case are called market failure. Which in this case are called market failure. Capitalism, like any other operating system, is prone to bugs, which in this case are called the market failure.
By far the largest is that market prices fail to take social and environmental costs into account. These are called market failures. By far the largest is that market prices fail to take
by far the largest is the market prices fail to take
social and environmental costs into account.
social and environmental cost into account. By far the largest that market fails to take social and environmental impacts into account.
That means that every market transaction is based on incorrect information and fail to take social and environmental costs into account. That means that every market transaction
That means that every market transaction
is based on incorrect information.
is based on incorrect information.
And this fundamental bug of capitalism, environmental
Every market transaction is based on incorrect information.
costs into account. That means that every market transaction is based on incorrect information. And this fundamental bug of capitalism, more than any other single factor, is to blame for a climate predicament. Capitalism is based on incorrect information. And this fundamental bug of capitalism,
This fundamental bug of capitalism,
more than any other single factor,
more than any other single factor,
is to blame for a climate predicament.
is to blame for climate predicament. And this fundamental bug, more than any other single factors, is to blame for climate predicament. Is to blame for okay.